Sure.
Appreciate it very much. So just since I just started broadcasting this, you just were talking about how you reshaped your room to make it kind of took out the desks and brought in furniture. And what do you call that again?
We call it an agile classroom because, well, for two reasons. One, being furniture, the style of the way that you arrange the classroom is pretty versatile. But really, I think the word agile classroom comes from a kid doesn't come in and pick their spot. Like, no one in my class has a spot, well, except for me. And then, but so a child might choose to sit in the recliner at 8, but by 8:30, because of the nature of the work, they've moved to the collaborative pub table and they're sitting at bar stools with 3 other kids because the project that they're working on requires some collaboration. And so they might be there at 9, and by 10 they're laying on the floor, and by 11 they're sitting in the hammock chair. So the idea of the agile classroom kind of comes from not only is the furniture mobile, but the children are mobile, and so that's kind of where that comes from. So the agile classroom was super successful. I taught summer school, 3 different classes, 1 week each, and I was worried because none of the kids that were coming in had any exposure to this, and but they handled it very, very well. So that was good.
Very cool. And if you could kind of speak to sort of I guess I think what to me is most interesting and maybe the most helpful for everybody is just kind of walking through the day. And since you have one-to-one iPad, from like a student's perspective and like the tasks that are assigned to them and what they're supposed to do, could you just kind of like walk us through maybe a typical day for you? And again,
Sure.
you're teaching 5th grade, just for correct.
Sure. The I'm a big believer in routine, consistency. I suppose that comes from my behavior background of being a BD teacher for the first 7 years. And so the kids come into class, and on the board I have called the iPad to-do list. So when they walk in the door in the morning, there are 5 tasks for them to complete. And the first one was always like their morning work, like we used to do it on paper, daily world language and daily math practice. So they start with that, and that was on their iPads. And then the second thing was always their kid blog. We blog every single day. Tuesdays and Thursdays, 2 days a week, they have to create a new post in their blog. And Monday, Wednesday, and Friday was comment day. And so they could go to their classmates' posts in our classroom and comment. But we also have made some connections outside with other classrooms, a class in Iowa, one in Michigan, one in California, one in Connecticut. And so they could go to their United States friends and comment. But we also had some international friends in Kuala Lumpur, New Zealand, England, and so they could go to their students' blogs and comment on theirs. Then they also had to go to their own personal blog, and anyone who had commented to them, they had to reply to those comments. And so that was kind of their daily writing piece. And at the beginning, when we first got our iPads, one of the cool things with iPad Academy is you get a technology coach that would come to your room and answer any questions that you had. And so my coach said when we first started, it's really important to me that you blog. And I have never been a blogger. I'm terrible about journal writing. Like as a teacher with my students and personally, I don't do any of that. And so I didn't really buy in, to be quite honest. I was like, this will be something we do once to make him happy. But the kids loved it, and the success was exponential. One of the children that I had in my room for the last 2 years was a behavior disorder child, and to give you some indication, when he was in 3rd grade, he spent 13 minutes a day in class. The rest was basically in timeout. He just could not handle the classroom. We had huge improvements last year. By the time he was with me in 5th grade again, he was out of the classroom 10 minutes a quarter. He was out of the classroom that amount of time. Otherwise, he was almost exclusively in the classroom. But writing, all that to tell you, writing was one of the things that set him off. And so the first day he blogged, he wrote 1 sentence for me. And I thought, well, that's pretty good. He didn't throw a fit. He didn't throw the iPad. I'll be happy with 1 sentence. 3 weeks after we had started this blogging process, he was blogging. He was my only student, but he was blogging 3 or 4 days a week, writing posts 3 or 4 days a week, because he wasn't happy just doing it on Tuesday and Thursday.
That's awesome.
It was incredible.
This was a good opportunity. I know maybe some folks have some questions, because a lot of people, I think, have been interested in blogging in here. And so I'll just open it up, and if you have a question, I'll mute my microphone. If you just unmute your microphone and have a question, I'll let them ask any questions. So I'm going to mute my microphone, and if someone just wants to ask a question real quick, go ahead.
Sure, that'd be great. You're all shy?
We've got one coming now.
Okay.
Oh,
Maybe?
there you go.
Okay, can you give an example of like a blog prompt or how you actually get the kids to blog? And is it usually like really structured, or do you let them kind of blog on whatever they'd like to?
That's a very great question. You know, when I started, I felt like it was really important to always give them a prompt. And I had been on Pinterest and seen somebody that had put up like the 20-day blog challenge. And so I had kind of taken that and used some of those prompts. The very first prompt that I had them do, it was about a week after we had started using the iPads. And so the first prompt that I had them write about was getting the iPads. And then that second day that they had to do it, that Thursday when they had to write their prompt, I gave them another prompt about what their favorite part of using the iPad was. And then that was right around the time of the Super Bowl. And I have a lot of boys in here who are feeling really passionate about football. And so my coach said, you know, maybe this third time that they set a post, you just let them write about whatever they want. And I thought, okay, well, I can do that this time. So I let them write about whatever they wanted, and almost 2/3 of my boys wrote about the Super Bowl and their team and why they picked it. And then at that point, we taught them how to embed pictures and video into their blog. So that like added this whole new element to it. They were super excited about it. And so the next Thursday came, and he said, why don't you try it again? Like, see how when they write on their own, see what happens. And the kids started writing about what they were passionate about, and it changed my blogs from 2 or 3 sentences to giant paragraphs. I have one little girl that is an animal activist, and she wrote 3 paragraphs on being a foster parent to puppies and things like that, so that was really cool. So then what I started doing was just letting them blog. They wrote posts about whatever they wanted, but if they were stuck, I always had some prompts, and they were just basic journal prompts that we used to write in our journals, and you can find millions of those little prompts online. And so I would just say, if you don't have something to write about, you can come see me, and I'll give you a couple of ideas you can choose from. And I would tell them 2 or 3 prompts, or I'd give them a page that I had copied and just say, hey, check it out. So then to go back to that blog post that I found on Pinterest about the 20-day blog challenge, I went ahead and pulled that into a Google Doc, and I made it a 40-day challenge, so I put 40 blog posts on there, and then I just shared that with them in their Google Drives. So then I would say to them, so I got a little smarter about this as I went along, I would say, you can blog about whatever you'd like, or open up the Google Drive if you need some ideas and check out those 40 ideas and write about one of those. So it was very successful.
Excellent. Does anybody else have any other questions, with specifics about blogging or anything that she's discussed? Oh, we got enough. Do you want to call up? He's going to call up. They lost power for a second. So
oh, rats.
How did you, did you read all the blogs? How did you keep up with all of the blogs? Or did you stop worrying about always reading every blog?
That is a great question, because my coach, we blog on a site called Kid Blog, and so you can set it up with parameters. So I, as the Kid Blog coach, have to approve all of their posts before they're posted. I also had to approve all of the comments that they made before they would be accepted onto their blog post. And so it was an adjustment. It was homework. I did read all of their blog posts. At the beginning, I was really thorough about it. And I was trying to go through and make like spelling corrections, and like I tried to do all of that. And then after that first week, I said to my coach, it's too much. Like I can't keep up. And he said, why are you changing what they write? Don't do that. Just read it. I mean, and as long as you can read it, put it up there with mistakes. Because then what happened is I also have teachers in those connecting worlds who are super amazing. And for example, I have one little boy who wrote like a giant chunk of paragraph with not one piece of punctuation in it. There was not one period in the whole thing. And she wrote back to him and commented on, gave him very nice compliments, and then at the very end said, and Jacob, what a nice chunk of writing you did, but I am out of breath from reading it because I didn't know where to stop. There were no periods. In that one comment, I mean, I've been beating periods into this kid's head for 2 years. That one comment completely changed the way he wrote because he never forgot punctuation after that. And if I had gone through and punctuated it, he never would have learned that. So it became easier as the time went because I stopped making corrections. At one point, I have one boy who was not a great speller, and so when I would read it, it was just a nightmare. And I just would say to him, I would kind of cruise through his first. I mean, I kind of knew to look for his. And I would go through and say, hey, Kyle, when you wrote your post, were there a lot of red underlines? And he'd say, yeah. And I'd say, well, the red underlines mean you spelled some things wrong, so figure that out. And so he would go back and make his own corrections, which was also very nice. And then I didn't have to do it. So they can update and edit their posts before I put them out there into the world. And we talk about a thing called WOW, W-O-W, and it's worthy of the web. So is what you wrote worthy of going out there on the web for people to read? And if it doesn't have that wow factor, don't put it up there. So that was a good way to get them to motivate and be good writers because they wanted it to be worthy to be posted on the web for other people to read.
That's excellent. Any other questions? Okay. Go ahead, I'll mute mine.
I just had a question from teaching standpoint. After the 60 hours, did you feel prepared? And as far as maybe you could speak to lesson planning and how you had to revamp everything.
That's a great question. No, I was not prepared. The 60 hours gave me a lot of basic information about how to use a couple of apps. The greatest learning curve for me with the iPads was there is no way to know everything that's out there. And so the coach would come to me and say, here's a great app, I want you to try it in your room. I'm like, Ask 3. This is a perfect example because you guys can't use it anymore. It's going away in June. Oh, no, it's July. It's gone. Anyway, he was like, Ask 3, I want you to use it. I go, I don't know anything about it. He goes, it's okay. Just give it to the kids for 5 minutes. They'll figure it out, and they'll teach you about it. And I was like, okay. So that was the hardest transition for me was I became, through the iPad classroom, I became less of a teacher and more of just a facilitator. And it's easy to facilitate any app. You just say, I'm going to give you 5 minutes. I want you to give it a try, see how it works, and then at the end of 5 minutes, I'm going to have you partner up with somebody and show them what you've learned. And so they would do that, and then we would spend 2 or 3 minutes doing that. And at the end of that time, I would say to them, let's have some points of discovery. That's what we called it. And so they could raise their hand and kind of say what they discovered. And then I would say, is there anybody who couldn't figure something out? And somebody might say, well, I couldn't figure out how to delete what I made. Immediately another hand would go up and say, I know how to do that. And so we would put them up on the rover cart projection kind of like this, and they would explain how they did it. So they became teachers of each other, and then I learned from what they discovered. Because I found this is an age thing, so you guys are going to be so much more better off than I was. I am very hesitant to try new things, so I don't want to just push that button on the iPad because I don't know what it's going to do. I want to know what it's going to do before I push it. Well, the kids don't have that hesitation. They'll touch everything. They don't care. And so they learn much faster than I do, and I found that I learned more from them, I think, than they learned from me. But with that, I would like to say their learning curve was tremendous. My math scores and reading scores went up exponentially. Math more than reading. My math, we take this test called the MAP test. And we took it in the fall. We take it right away at school starts August. We take it in the winter, and we take it again in the spring. When I took it in the fall, my math scores were in the 44th percentile. When I took it in the spring, in May, we took it the first week of May, 87% of my kids. So I went from 44 to 87. Now, part of that's the math program, and they do it right at the beginning, so I understand they lose a lot during the summer, but I almost doubled my math scores as far as the percentages go of kids who were proficient. That, to me, is amazing. And I think a lot of it has to do with the motivation on the iPad, because their learning it's exponential. I mean, they take everything to the very next level. That has been the best part about the iPads. And I think my biggest challenge with the iPads, sorry, I don't know if this is jumping ahead, is parents. Parents are your biggest obstacle in this, because they come in with the attitude of, my kids already have enough screen time. I don't want them to have screen time all during school. So with that, knowing that that was going to be a stumbling block, I communicated with them daily. Every day I sent an email. Here's an app that we used today. Here's what we did. I had parents come in 3 different times. They came in once a month. We called them iPad 101 classes. And the kids would come in, or the parents would come in first. I had them all different times during the day. But they would sit with their child. They would have assigned tasks of things they had to show them. They would have a project they would have to work on with their parent, and then they would have a little free time to show them some of the extra things. It was incredible. 3 families ended up buying iPads because of what they learned in the 101 class. So that was pretty amazing. I mean, not that I'm proposing people should go out there and buy iPads, but before they were saying, well, I wouldn't get an iPad for my child because I figured they'd just use it for games. But now that I can see what they can do with it, I absolutely want one in their hands.
Very awesome. Questions before? Oh, go ahead. Yeah, we have one more question here.
Sure.
I just have a follow-up. I was wondering, do you use the iPads all day?
Oh, that's a great question.
Yeah.
I want to go back a little bit because I'm not sure I answered your question about lesson plans. A little bit on the fly. I did a lot of teaching on the fly. I probably put in 80 hours a week getting things ready, kind of learning. I sort of experimented with flipped classroom a little bit, so doing videos for math to teach them ahead of time. Like I said, because I'm a hesitant learner, the first time I did it took me 14 hours to create a 2-minute video to teach them about angles. So it was a nightmare. and I will tell you, I've gotten much better. I can do a 2-minute video in about 3 minutes now. And I think it's just because my learning curve was so big, but I have grown children. In fact, we just sent my son to boot camp yesterday. He's going to be a freshman in college next fall, and my daughter's a senior. So with them being so busy, and my husband works nights, so it works okay for me to devote that time, but I know that that's not a feasibility for everyone. So yes, my lesson planning, because I know what I'm teaching, because I've done this job for so long, the thing was then just how do I take what I teach and make it iPad applicable? Or how can I make it a better lesson using the iPads? I know there's a lot of teachers who just say, well, we're teaching multiplication today, so we are just going to multiply on the iPad instead of doing it on paper. I wanted to take it to another level. How can I teach them how to multiply by doing something with the iPad that is way different than they did? So lots of times I would say we would practice a couple on the board, and I would say to them, now I want you to make a video teaching someone else how to multiply. So they would do it on their Explain Everything app, make the video, and they would show it to somebody else. And then the coolest part about this is the kids would say, you did a really nice job with your video, but here's what you forgot. Why did you even put the number up on the top? You didn't explain that carrying thing very well. You should go back and redo your video. So in a half-hour time, instead of doing 12 problems, they might only do 2, but their grasp and their understanding was incredible. And then the really good videos we uploaded to YouTube, and I put them on my iTunes University site. So now those are there forever for me to explain and have kids show. So the drive and the motivation for that, oh my gosh, Mrs. Boyce is going to keep my video. I will totally do a much better job. You know, or you didn't talk loud enough, or you missed this part. So that was really cool. Okay, and I forgot your other question. I'm so sorry. Because I went back to answer your lesson plan video. I can't remember your follow-up question.
I think you covered it.
Okay.
Chris has a question here.
Sure, sure.
This is it on this? It works on this? Okay. Oh, okay then. I was wondering, when it came to blogging specifically, when it came to structuring the comments that other students would leave on blogs, how do you do that structuring as to like what they comment on, what's acceptable, what kind of like would you prompt say for comments?
That's very good. You know, when we started talking about commenting, I am a big believer in sharing and making things a little easier. And a teacher in California had her second and third graders make a YouTube video on how to post a quality comment. So instead of, you know, we talked about in here, we had a class meeting, we talked about what things you'd like to hear, and then I showed them this video that these second graders make, and they had 5 tips for making a good quality comment. They talked about being positive, being sure it's spelled correctly, asking a question, addressing the prompt, and making a connection with them somehow. Like, you know, if they are talking about their favorite vacation, then maybe in their comments they say, and they had been there, you know, maybe say, hey, I went to this place with my family last summer, and here's what we did. So the second graders that made that how to post a quality comment was huge for my kids. And we would review that probably every 2 weeks or so. Do you remember how to make a quality comment? And we would list those 5 things. And it made a huge difference because it took the comments from going from cool or sweet to, oh, I really like that you were there. And then they would ask a follow-up comment, because we talked about comments should be a place to start a conversation in a blog, not just leave a comment. So that's kind of, I would recommend, it's only a 2 or 3 minute video, I think, but definitely it's on YouTube, just how to leave a quality comment. That's a great video.
Very cool. One of the things you kind of mentioned earlier was just, you know, obviously, you know, for teaching a long time, you've got a lot of experience planning, and you know, several of the students in here have taught for a year or several years or no years, so we've got sort of of people in their sort of teaching experience. And I think for a lot of people, a question that seems that I'm feeling a little bit is just sort of like, what are some go-to things or just some strategies when it comes to planning that help you and guide you, and also with respect, obviously you had to spend a lot of time kind of redeveloping things for the iPad, but if you were just to say, hey, I'm going to teach this today, what's like a go-to thing that would be helpful for you? I think you've already covered some of them, but if you have any others, just like a go-to thing that really helps you with planning, or an activity that works that you can adapt to any sort of content or whatever.
Sure. By nature, I'm not a planner. I'm more of a fly by the seat of my pants kind of girl, and so planning has always been really difficult for me. So here's what I relied on a lot. My colleagues. If you have somebody that you trust and work well with, like, really rely on them to help you, especially if they've got some experience, because I kind of know what's coming. Because I am terrible about, I look at what I have to teach today, and that's what I really focus on, and I don't really look at what I have to teach tomorrow. So, which is great most of the time, but sometimes I get ahead of myself. Like, math is terrible. It's my worst subject. And so I'll look at something like prime and composite numbers, and I'll think, oh, you know what would be really good? If I could teach the kids how to do prime factorization, and we do factor trees. And then I don't realize that that lesson is really coming up like 3 lessons away. And there's some things they should learn before they learn how to make factor trees. And so if I was so I would tell you, rely on your colleagues. I teach with 2 guys who have been doing this for quite some time, and they're both really, really good at math. And so I'll say, hey, today we're doing prime factors and composites. Here's what I intend to do. And they're really good about saying, don't do that, because that's coming in 3 days. Don't hurry that along. Teach them, get a good grasp on this, and go from there. So colleagues would be a huge piece of your planning. And maybe it would be a really good piece of advice for me to go ahead and like maybe look at a week out and then just spend some good quality time on today's lesson, but look at what's coming for the week. I'm not good at that. I'm a terrible person to ask about planning because I really do just kind of show up in the morning and give it a go over before I start the day.
Well, I appreciate the honesty. But I would have to say, I think it sounds like it's going wonderfully. I don't want to keep you for too long, but do you have any kind of like final thoughts? And I'll just kind of open it up for any final questions that maybe advice that you would give, or just general thoughts. Because again, I don't want to take your time. We got a few other things to cover this morning. So
Sure.
final thought.
I would think the two thoughts that I try and leave all the new teachers that I come in contact with, one is for classroom survival, and the other is just your year survival. The first one for classroom survival is don't be afraid to really spend the first 5 weeks really building relationship with your kids, and be strict in your discipline, whatever your discipline plan is, whatever your classroom management, like really drive that home those first 5 weeks, because by developing those relationships and setting those expectations, you're setting your year up for success. And I spend those first 5 weeks being the meanest queen bee, the first that I can, but really getting to know the kids, and literally it takes my discipline problems down to nothing for the year. I have very few, I think I probably average maybe 1 or 2 kids who have to go to the office once or twice a year. Really, everything gets taken care of in-house because I spend that time at the beginning building relationships with them. So that's kind of classroom management survival. And the second piece is, and I can't stress it enough, not just with the iPads, but your parents are your biggest allies. They can be your worst nightmare or the biggest dream, and you have to set that up. So communicate with them as much as you can, not just in the negative situations, but in the day-to-day stuff, weekly newsletters, or I probably email my parents, now that we're kind of into the iPads for a while, but even before the iPads, I would say I emailed my parents probably 3 days a week, and sometimes it was just a super quick email to all of them that said, hey, just wanted you to know we're studying prime and composite numbers this week. Or sometimes it would be, we've got an upcoming test, or hey, I just want you to know here's a really cool thing we're doing this week. The more you can keep parents informed, the more you will have them on your side. So those are my 2 pieces of advice.
Awesome. Does anybody have any final questions that you'd like to ask before we close up top? Russell's got a question here.
Sure. Hi, Russell.
Okay. Hi. My question is you kind of spoke about it a little bit, but what are some go-to projects or apps that you kind of do just as like a default when you're trying to come up with an iPad activity for a certain topic?
Here's what I'll tell you. We try really hard to, in the world of apps, stay away from what we call the one-and-done apps. Those would be apps that are like the drill and practice kind of things, or you use them once and then they're the same every time you go back to them. And we try and work more towards the creation kind of apps. So that would be things like Explain Everything is phenomenal because you can do any curricular area with that. You can do it can get used as paper pencil, it can make videos, it can just do audio. So that's a really good one that we use a ton. Haiku, and these, well, Explain Everything costs money, but a lot of them are free because, you know, the district doesn't just give me money, which is sad. But like Haiku Deck is a presentation style one with slides that's pretty simple. They use that a lot. If you teach younger kids, Screen Chomp is a great free one that is a little bit like Explain Everything, but it's much simpler. We didn't use that one very often. They didn't like it. Oh my gosh, my brain is just stop motion animation. We did that a lot. They used it, oh gosh, they used stop motion animation one time for a vocabulary lesson. They had 5 vocabulary words, and oh gosh, hold on, my lights just went out. Sorry, we have motion detentive lights. Anyway, like one of their words was burrowed, and so they had to use these letter tiles that came in that spelled the word burrowed, and then they had to create a way to show what the word meant. And so I had one little boy that laid a piece of paper and he like cut some holes in it, and then the letters went down into the paper, and he did it with his stop motion animation. So he totally described the definition of the word burrowed with just that. He had no audio to it or anything. It was really cool. Like, the genius of what they come up with, what they're inspired by, is incredible to me. So really look towards those creation apps and stay away from kind of the one and done sort of things.
Okay.
Any other questions? Oh, we got one here. Yep.
Okay, my question was just, we're teaching in a school that's not one-to-one, but I've thought about using blogs before.
Sure.
And I was just wondering if you had any insight on how I could make something like that work without having a one-to-one classroom, and especially for kids who might not have computers at home, if anything like that would even be possible.
Sure. You know, there are lots of classrooms that we talk to. The one in Kuala Lumpur, Mrs. Nani's class, she doesn't have any kind of devices in her room. I think they have one computer maybe for their class, and that's it. And so they don't necessarily do individual blogging, but they do a class blog. And so I'm not sure how she structures that. But if you have any exposure at all to a computer lab of any kind, even if you blog once a week, if you could get in there once a week, or like at Bellevue, it's once every 8 days that they get into the computer lab. Like, that would be a way that you could keep up with it. And literally the first couple times we blogged, it took a long time. Like, it would take a whole half-hour computer lab time. But by the end of it, the kids who blogged a long time, they might blog 30 minutes, but lots of kids would get it done in 5 to 10. So it would be something that you could use computer lab time for your blogging initially, and then have another activity that you're doing in there as well. But there are some that, lots of people we follow have a class blog instead of individual blogs. And so that works out great.
Cool.
Hey, Mike, I know they have questions, but I have one more thing to show them from that iTask board.
Yeah.
Went and pulled, oh yeah. I went and pulled some of the, you know, I talked about the beginning, if we have a list of things for them to do in the morning. So what I did, I'm going to try and put these up here.
Yeah, I love those, yes.
So these are my task board things. I just went to Google and I made a PowerPoint. No, I don't think I did it in PowerPoint. Maybe I did. And I just copied the picture and then blew it up, and I have a little magnet on the back. And so what happens is, I'm going to try and unplug here. Oh, I did think about Russell. The other great app that we use is called Stick Around. It's the most outstanding app I have ever experienced. So then I would just put them on the board like this, and then they would know that the first thing they have to do is whatever's in Notability, the second thing is in Stick Around, and the third thing they would have to do is in Haiku Deck. So I don't ever even have to give those visual directions, those verbal directions. It would just be up there visually for them to see. So I could spend my morning at the door doing greeting and how are you today kinds of things, and the kids would automatically know what they needed to get started on. But Stick Around, I would encourage you all to look into Stick Around. Hands
Yes,
down.
I previewed that just very briefly when we had kind of a tools and apps thing. But yeah, I love that visual cue that you made. I think that's really, really awesome. That's a really neat idea.
And then I have one for everything. So like if we're going to do something in iMovie, if they have to go, here's the Explain Everything one. Google Drive is one that we use. We use Google Drive almost every single day. So I have a Google Drive app. Picture. If they're going to go to something on the internet, they have to go to Chrome. So anything that we would have used. This one is Khan Academy. It's math. So anything that they use, I have a whole slew of them.
That is awesome. Well, I feel like we could talk all day because you were just a fountain of wisdom for us. Thanks so much for doing this. We're going to kind of process and reflect on this a little bit. So, if there aren't any other questions, I think we'll say goodbye. And just it's just outstanding to talk to you because you have so many awesome things that are going on in your classroom. And I think that for any level, even though we've got teachers at all different levels, I think it's just great stuff for any level. So thank you very much. We really appreciate it. And
You're welcome.
this will be on my Google Plus channel or YouTube if you want to share it out or take a look at it. So
Okay, I definitely will. And be sure and share with them my Twitter handle,
okay.
at BoyceM3. And then if you have any questions or any of you have the opportunity, you'd like to stop and see me once school starts, you are more than welcome to come in and visit because we love to have visitors.
Outstanding. Awesome. Yeah, I everybody that we're doing video chats with here in these days, I'm adding to. I have a PLN page for there. This is a growing thing. So
Great. Yeah, my email, everything. Just hand it out.
Awesome. Sounds great.
Hey.
Thank you so much. We'll talk to you later.
You bet. Good luck.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.